Let's start
the Topical Pursuit Podcast. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Topical Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host Drew, and as always, I'm joined with Mrs. M, but Mrs. is not here. Don't worry, listeners, she's not on hospital giving birth right now. We're still not there yet. We've got a week to go, kind of thing. But we thought we wanted to branch out the podcast with, obviously, with us having a child on the way. I can imagine we're going to be a little bit busier than usual. So the kind of weekly bi-weekly podcasts are going to fall aside. So we thought we'd introduce a couple more people. And I'm happy to say I'm joined with Johnty and the Buff. And that's what I'm going with. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, happy to be
here. Yes, are you happy to be here?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm the Buff, Craigie Buff.
Absolutely. So essentially what we want to do with this segment was we want to open up the podcast a little bit more because there's so many topics and being called Topical Pursuit, we really wanted to start branching out into different sort of areas because there's more to the world than just TV shows and films and alcoholic drinks. So what we wanted to do was try and get a bit more into the sports side of things, and in particular we wanted to see how we were discussing off air before we came on how we fell away from wrestling over the years, as many people do. You like it and you sort of just get a little bit older. Time's not on your side anymore to sit down and actually commit to watching it because there's shows on almost every night now. It's as busy as football. So you naturally fall away from it. But recently, I think that's a testament to how big wrestling sort of is sports entertainment, that it just got over Twitter again, and it's something that piqued my interest was CM Punk made his long-awaited return. Was it 7 years it's been since we last seen him on some kind of wrestling show? So I thought that was really interesting, and you said that yourself as well, Johnty, that sort of piqued your interest, and you thought, I'm going to start try to see if I can try to get back into this and see what's going on, kind of thing. So we thought we'd get the experts on, not that Johnty and myself are that kind of thing, but we've got Buff here, and Buff is going to give us a wee sort of insight to what's been happening more recently than not.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've always, I've stayed a wrestling fan for years. I've always loved wrestling. One of my early loves was wrestling. Too much in now, but just kind of started off with trading cards and sticker books used to get when I was younger.
Numbers, is that?
Panini albums and that,
Yes.
yeah. The images I would see as a kid, I was like superhero, and then the introduction of Sky TV gradually came in when I was younger, as easily accessible as it is. Just started getting wee bits. It was actually at first, the richer neighbours in the neighbourhood were the ones that would
get the Sky.
They would record it though, and then you'd get a tape. You'd get a VHS tape.
I think my early access to Monday Night Raw was going down and visiting Manny on a Monday night and seeing it then.
So we just kind of, we'd get wee bits now and again, the pay-per-views and stuff, and the first one ever, 91, which we'll talk about later, one about our earlies later on, but, so I just kind of started wrestling, started loving it, really enjoying it. It took off in a big way in the early 90s, and,
it was right at the beginning, I suppose, if there was going to be a part where what wrestling is today to what it was then, that's probably when that was the decade that done it.
That was the start of the global phenomenon it became, and it's always maintained WWE to this day. But we'll touch on that in the future and stuff like that. But that was that's what got me at the time. And I've always just kind of stayed a fan, through the years. But it's quite easy to follow and not invest in it. In the past, we had competition with WWF, WWE, as it was at the time. You had your ECW, your WCW. It was great. And, the late 90s one fan, even people at that point, was a great time. It kind of went from the kind of cartoonish PG era wrestling to the kind of more adult, more exciting, hard hitting.
Yeah, it's like a buffet of football, wasn't it?
It was dangerous and exciting and controversial, all that kind of stuff. And you had your WWE, your Stone Cold H and all that. Your WCW, Sting, the Outsiders, or the UO. Hulk Hogan became a bad guy, became a lot edgy. ECW was like the hardcore wrestling, blood and guts, very sort of type. Paul Heyman, all that, and just all that kind of was at the time. And
that was your era as well, Johnty, wasn't it? That was your kind of
was me,
special shout out to DX and stuff like that as well. So that was a really exciting time to be a fan, and it was so good at that point that as the competition eventually died away, WCW went bankrupt, ECW went bankrupt over everything. Just eventually.
And in many ways, would you not say now? Because me and John were speaking about this before. That's kind of what it must be so hard to strike a balance between catering to the different audiences. It's went so PG now, and I think that's maybe why, because if someone said to me, why did you fall away from watching wrestling? I think I could give you loads of different reasons, but I couldn't give you a sort of definitive one other than, it changed. I feel like wrestling moved away from me. Do you know what I mean? I know it sounds silly because it's clearly me that's grown up and changed, but I think wrestling changed as much, if not more, to what it used to be. Because we all have fond memories of the Attitude Era in the early noughties, the Alliance, the WCW, and even the amalgamation of the three kind of big ones, the WCW, the ECW, and the WWE. That was huge. But it still wasn't enough to keep us. And it's not for a lack of talent, because many years after I followed it, you still had greats like your Kurt Angles and your Rock and Triple H, you know, they were still at even John Cena, you know, the height of their powers kind of thing, you know, so, and it just wasn't enough to keep me on a weekly basis.
The problem that became with wrestling is in terms of us as adults, the general worldwide population and people watching it a weekly basis, you know, it was just kind of, WWE is, I wouldn't say a victim of success, but it became a bit stagnant. It was harder to
with no competition to push it, it kind of just found its level. And
yeah, it just found its level, and what it became is great for the kids, obviously. Kids are going to love it, and, you know, as younger, you're going to let your kids watch it or take your kids to see it, because you loved it when you were younger, even if you're not invested at the moment and that kind of thing. So it's always going to, the reason WWE survived so long and didn't go a WCW, because you've got that market for the kids, you've got that hardcore wrestling fan market still, that will just watch it anyway, like myself, even though half the time I complain about it. And then you've got, you know, the global market in terms of, there's people, you know, they do these events in Saudi Arabia, the Greatest Rumble and all these kind of things. The Saudis are paying a fortune. The deal was like $1 billion for for a certain amount, like 10 shows over 10 years for $1 billion or something like that.
That seems to be the goal for sport now. You know, and you had it there as well. You know,
and I'm not saying it's a backward country or anything like that, but
no, it's money, but you know,
but they still think like Hulk Hogan and Andre Giant are wrestling literally. They want to see, you know, the matches for the 90s still. So I don't know. I think the TV there is showing matches from 1990s still.
It's taking that long for the TV reception to get there. I go, look at these guys, Ric Flair. Look, who's that?
So the problem with WWE became is that they're still going to be successful. They're still making money.
Their market is still bigger than, like, they're gaining more fans or more new young fans than I suppose they're losing sort of older fans.
Still get TV contracts, they're getting the Saudi money, they've got their sponsors and all that. Problem for us as fans, as marks as we call it, you know, it just became a bit stagnant and boring. You know, they're playing it safe. They want to protect their sponsorships.
Let's dive into that, because I like that, what you're saying there. So, John, you were saying before how, or we were discussing about, like, pushing certain characters. So if you want, let's start most recently, right? The women's title. We just seen Becky Lynch come back, and basically set up, they spent all the work on Bianca for months and months and months. And then Becky Lynch came right in there at the last pay-per-view and just took the glory to the point of booze.
Well, that's been a big problem with WWE as well, in terms of the way they've been booking is very lazy and reactive to an extent. And we'll touch on the new company, the up-and-coming company, in a wee second, and this is part of the reason why they're doing these things just now as well. But you've got somebody like Becky Lynch, who was really popular before she went away to have her baby. She was basically on maternity leave. She's came back, really popular, but WWE bring her back, and she obviously wasn't, because something happened to one of the female wrestlers, Sasha Banks, still know what's happened there, but she was meant to be wrestling Bianca Belair. They spent months building Bianca, and I'm not the biggest fan of this person in terms of who I'm a fan of as well. I mean, but if you're going to invest in a wrestler and build them up to be a champion, you know, invest all this time and stuff, and then Becky Lynch comes back at the last minute because she was a stand-in, basically. They brought her back maybe a month or two, a wee bit too early, because you could tell she couldn't do a match. I think she wasn't in the best shape. She wasn't match fit, basically, yeah. So that's part of the reason why it was so quick. But they basically got Becky to win the belt in the space of like, and it's just, it's not a good way.
In many ways, it's kind of like, it echoes what they done a wee while ago with Kofi Kingston. And, you know, when you talk about that, I mean, the build-up, they spent, honestly, I mean, it was a different tact, I suppose, because that started off complaints almost, didn't it? That he wasn't getting a fair push. And he did, I mean, walk us through that, essentially. So from the point where it started, he wasn't getting a push, and the crowd got behind him anyway, everyone's against Vince kind of thing. And he made it happen, but like you say, they took this sort of rug from under it.
Same thing happened. Months and months of build-up. He's been in WWE for years. There's actually a really interesting stat that I just thought of, sorry, just randomly, but in terms of over the whole history of wrestling, the top 10 wrestlers who have had the most victories of all time in terms of house matches, that's matches that aren't on, and also on TV and pay-per-views, like everything combined. Number one is John Cena, but very interesting. So you've got all your legends that you would expect to be there, like your Shawn Michaels, your Randy Ortons and stuff, right? Kofi Kingston.
Just stop you there, Craig. I'm surprised that John Cena's number one.
No, that's not.
Every single house show that.
It was actually my mate Marv says, guess who's in the top 10, and like me and my other friend Boydie, who hopefully meet in the future on this podcast, me and him were trying to guess all the wrestlers, and we're like, right, obviously got to be number one. It's like, yeah, okay. So then we had to guess the other 9, and we got there eventually, but there was there's your obvious ones like your Shawn Michaels, your Hulk Hogan and stuff, right? The funny thing was, Boydie's, I don't know if I should apologise, because he didn't like to use his actual. Anyway, he called himself.
Boydie's his real name?
he was the Nature Boy. He was Nate. So we'll say Nate. Sorry, but his hero in wrestling was Bret Hart. And I said Bret Hart's got to be in the top 10. He's like, nah, he's not. He's definitely not in the top 10. Bret Hart was number 4. But anyway, because we consider a lot of things like, how long have they been at? I consider Bret Hart started way back in all through that decade in the 80s and 90s. Anyway, I'll waffle on. But what I was trying to get to the point is, Kofi Kingston, although he never held a major title, although wasn't always the biggest guy or anything like that, he was, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember what number he was in that top 10, but Kofi Kingston's in that top 10. I think he was number 7 for all-time victories in WWE, which was amazing. I was like, we were like, because we got the 9 out of 10, and we're like, so who's the other guy? Like, you'll not get it, and we're just like, and then we eventually, and I started thinking, I nearly got it. I was like, right, so the New Day been really popular for years now, and then Kofi had been around since like the noughties as well, and I was like, maybe because he was a babyface, and see when you're on house shows as not on TV, the babyfaces win because it's not on TV, so the bad guys aren't always losing, although they are, but they are on, when it's not on TV, the bad guys mostly do lose. Yeah. So I was like, but I never said them, I was thinking. And then when eventually we had to give up, and then I was like, it's Kofi King. It's like, so.
I think I'd say about Kofi as well, I can never really remember him being hurt for a long time. He's kind of working. I think he had a few injuries.
Maybe once he done something with his biceps or something. So I think he done that one.
But well, it's not one you would pick straight out of your head. I can see why you also didn't get him, but he has been around a long time.
Because you think all the legends, and I suppose you would consider him a legend now. Technically, like, maybe not in the scale in terms of,
he was a top guy.
But he's always been there, round about, upper mid-card. But the interesting thing was, obviously we're walking on a wee bit there about him, but that's the point I was trying to get to. This guy has been successful overall, and he deserved the push he was getting. The fans got behind him. People have recognised this. He kind of had a stop-start thing with Randy Orton in the early noughties. Not noughties, sorry, what do you call the
the tens.
Is it just the tens or whatever? Just the tens, yeah. So it was like maybe about 2010, 2011. He had this. This is when he was starting to get a push, and something happened. Maybe that's the. Don't know, but something happened anyway. Maybe I dropped the bottle now. Something happened and it stopped his push, and he just never got that push. And it took years and years later. Gets this push, goes on for months. Fans are behind him. The pops he was getting, massive cheers at arenas because it was before COVID and all that as well. Then eventually wins the title at WrestleMania, defends it for 3 or 4 months, and I will say it wasn't the best title run, but I mean it was okay. And then Brock Lesnar comes back, and Brock Lesnar's going to beat him. That's fine, but he done it in seconds. And why? It's like just so lazy and silly. And yeah, we know Brock Lesnar's a monster and this, but I'm in 6. Like it was literally 6 seconds or something.
Agreed.
And it was just stupid.
Total made it like a mismatch kind of thing, like not a true champion.
This is also part of the reason why guys, not guys, it's just like people are just not watching as much nowadays, because why would they when you're not going to invest in someone, when you know that you're only going to want to watch it when somebody like Brock Lesnar does come? It's like, why would you watch the in between with the regular guys? Because the regular guys are jobbers, babe. Mm-hmm. You can spend months and months on these people and making them out to be these amazing wrestlers and heroes, but then when somebody like Brock Lesnar comes back for like a day or two and then beats him in 6 seconds, why are you going to watch it until he comes back?
Well, that's it, and and it's like it causes it to reverberate around the Twitter sphere, like the CM Punk coming back, like that's why that sort of piqued this sort of interest kind of thing. And so I mean, moving on to that kind of thing, this is probably the weakest WWE's ever been. Obviously the coronavirus has kind of decimated the industry. It stopped it doing its live shows on the road, which is a huge slice of income for them.
The fact, just sorry to interrupt you for a second, the funny thing about that is this is the strongest WWE's been in terms of talent.
Yes,
right?
yes.
In terms of booking and overall and stuff, and it's probably about the week, because as I say, we got lazy. They stopped the pyro and fireworks because it's safe. They stopped travelling about because it was safe. Obviously COVID is part of that, but they even stopped the pyro for COVID, so it wasn't just and for me as a wrestling fan, I love the spectacle and I love to see fireworks, and this new company that we're going to talk about in a minute brought the fireworks back, literally.
Well, we might as well just move on to it. So Tony Khan's AEW has emerged, and it started off not as a joke, but it was significantly weak. It was like it was Mike Tyson fighting a baby kind of thing, you know.
No,
it wasn't.
That's fair enough.
It wasn't there. Whereas now,
that's picked up.
Oh, honestly, it's absolutely 100 miles an hour. Like the speed it's went, it was like Roman Abramovich buying Chelsea. Like it's just overnight went from not winning anything to winning plenty kind of thing.
And picking up, you know, you're basically picking up quarterback level type talent, you know, and that's the thing as well. I mean, when it started out, you know, it was probably guys that weren't really too well known. You know, I mean, we were talking about before, you know, I'd fallen out of wrestling, just get back into it a few months ago, and I was having to look at guys, and I was going, I don't know who that is, and, you know, I've had to look at some of their stuff that these guys did out in Japan. But from what I've seen of AEW so far, I think there's good points, but there's also bad points.
What would you say the bad points are then?
I'm still not convinced some of Tony Khan's booking.
He's listening, so you might as well go on.
Listen, Tony Khan's such a big mark, and he's such a wrestling geek, he probably is.
Go on, tell the man what you want to see. Tell him you want Undertaker is what you want.
Well, he would have to do some miracle to get him back to being fit right enough.
I reckon Vince McMahon would give up on life if Undertaker appeared in AEW, because that's his biggest guy. He loves him. He actually loves him. He's in tears, and Undertaker gets injured, but literally.
What parts? What would you say? Like if you could, what does AEW need to do? That's a kind of a question for both of you. If you want, you can answer it first, John, and then Craig, you can chip in. Sorry, Buff. What does AEW have to do to get on a level playing field with WWE, unless you think they're already there, and what do they need to do to go ahead of them?
Well, obviously I've only been watching it a couple of months, but for me, they definitely done really well recently, grabbing CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, and a couple of other guys from WWE. But I think what one of the big things they've done was getting CM Punk. And the guys they kind of have now, who are kind of top guys like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, I would say if you're a hardcore wrestling fan, you'll definitely know who they are. But like myself, who was kind of in and out of it, I'm like, I don't know who this.
Well, that's it. It's what leaves a lasting impression. Like you say, you watch WWE, and then you go, you watch it, you don't know who they are, and you're not intrigued to, like you say, you go and check and see some of these matches in Japan. Whereas, like you say, you watch AEW, and these wrestlers are leaving a lasting impression on you to the point you want to know more or watch again at least.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching Omega and Young Bucks, and, you know, I started to look into a bit more about them and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not massive fans of them, and this is going to go into my point.
Get them sacked, Tony. Get them sacked.
This is going to go into my point about what AEW has done well, though, these new signings is, I don't know if any of you've watched it, AEW Dynamite episode that CM Punk returned in Chicago. That guy's pop was like, the fans went absolutely crazy. It looked absolutely electric, you know, and
it's almost the longest I think I've seen a wrestler saunter about.
It took about 10 hours
to play music. Yeah, like, it was unbelievable how long it took.
But what my point is, I don't think Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks will ever get a reaction like that. Now, that's a bit unfair on them, because obviously I know CM Punk was a massive star in WWE, you know, for years, so he's well known more by more general fans and WWE fans, obviously. But I think what they've got right, new signings, and I think they can, if the booking's done right, I kick on from there.
What about yourself, Craig? Do you feel that's a fair assessment?
So I'll try and explain a few things there about what John's saying. It's quite true, but it's also reflective of how we weren't watching wrestling as well.
That's right.
And that's why EW are making a big impact right now. They
are
doing the right thing just now.
The things that Johnty's mentioned it, and even myself when I was chipping in, like, that's kind of what all we've got to go on. That's what's made a lasting impression, is because we don't have that backup knowledge from, we've not seen it morph.
Yeah.
Down the months, we've seen what stood out down the months. Do you know what I mean?
And that's exactly what AEW have done exactly right now. They have been building to just now, and they've done it properly just now, and they need to, as you were saying, build on that, but they have captured an audience now that are starting to capture an audience and taking away some of WWE's audience as well that they had to do to be successful, which is part of the plan. Because as you're saying, Tony Khan hasn't suddenly just appeared. Tony Khan's been there since the very start. Tony Khan's always been there. So the idea came from the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes.
They're all these, sorry to interrupt you, Buff, but they're obviously, as I did a wee bit, I like watching it, they're all the EVPs, which is a bit unusual for a wrestling company, because that's, as far as I'm aware, that's never really how it's normally structured.
And the connections in the name, you know, it's all elite wrestling, and they're the elite.
Yeah.
They are the founders of the company, along with Tony Khan. So what's literally happened there is that in Japan, the Bullet Club was really popular, and they're not original members. It was actually AJ Styles and Finn Balor who created the Bullet Club in Japan, and it became really popular. And I'm not going to go, it would take ages to go through it, or we'll go off on a massive tangent and we'll be here. The people who don't know anything about wrestling will be like, I don't know if I want to hear this.
We'll be here right through the next episode.
Yeah, we'll through here the next episode. It'll be like Lord of the Rings movies back to back, basically, and the Hobbit. But literally, so we've had lots of various members of the Bullet Club through the years, but Finn Balor and AJ Styles created it, and look how successful they are just now. So the guys that took over it morphed into what it is just now. There's actually technically two factions of the Bullet Club still existing just now. You've got in Japan, you've got the Bullet Club. This is where I need Nate, because he's the encyclopedia of actually who they exactly are and what exactly they're called. But there's a faction in Japan just now, and it's led by Tama Tonga, who's kind of like a Roman Reigns type kind of guy, and he's actually really good. He's such a good he's really cool actually. Like, I was actually hoping one day we'd actually get to WWE and like have a kind of rivalry with Roman Reigns. It'd be quite cool, and like, for leadership of the bloodline type of thing, that'd be really cool. But that's again going off on a tangent. But so we've got the Japanese Bullet Club, and we've got the Elite. The Elite still are technically the Bullet Club as well. They're the Elite Bullet Club. So they split into two, basically. And they were friends at first, but now it's a wee bit kind of rivalry. So anytime you see the Elite go to Japan, a wee bit of rivalry with the Japan Bullet Club thing. But yeah, so Kenny Omega, without a lie, has been probably the best wrestler in the world for like the last few years now. The problem with Kenny Omega is, but touching on what you said about they're not as well known and famous. That's understandable, because Kenny Omega could have went to WWE and could have now been at that level that AJ Styles is at now, but Kenny Omega held off and didn't want to go to WWE for various reasons, and part of the obviously knew that AEW were going to form and stuff, and he knocked back a contract for WWE. He could have been a much bigger name as such, but he's still. This is where AEW need to now capitalise on. The guys that they've taken from WWE are obviously huge names. So they need to get a good mix going now and build these guys up to be on their level, build the company up. And I would say, just the last bit just before you come in, AEW are now halfway through, I think, the business plan that they've had at the start. So they formed about 2.5 years ago. This is the middle point, halfway through, where they've built a good foundation, they got their company up and running, they got the hardcore fans on their side, they built on that. They're now starting to, because I've been watching it for the start, not as much as I'm watching it now, and that again is for the reasons that you are now interested in it as well, because they've signed these big stars, and that's just got me hooked now. It's like I needed a reason to watch it regularly, because the booking isn't, you know, so there's a lot of stupid stuff that happens. There's a lot of factions all the time, too many guys at one time, and that kind of stuff.
What was it that really bothered you the other week there, John? Something about was that?
Yeah, there's.
I was sitting watching.
This is another thing, Tony. You need to get shot of. John's not happy. He's not a happy man.
The race channel, and I was just like, what this is
product placement.
I mean, to be fair, what I would say is, I think if you've seen that WWE television, they would be.
You would go, I'm away to watch AEW because this is nonsense.
They'd be going, this is absolutely not. It's goofy and this is kids. And when it was on that, I was like, this is just the exact same.
I felt like with WWE just now, and I'm more into AEW just now, I'll admit. But
I think so,
no,
Buff.
but I'll defend WWE in this one. See, WWE get knocked for that stuff, time for the goofy stuff, the silly stuff, and right, and AEW done exactly that. And if AEW do it, there's nothing wrong, but if WWE do it, typical WWE, stupid and silly. But AEW can get away with it because they're cooler just now, do you know what I mean? But yeah, I like the Space Jam stuff to an extent. I know what you're saying, though, that some of it was quite goofy. But I liked when they came down at first and the tune came in.
They had the actual tune in from Space Jam.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny at that bit when they were like spinning the basket, and they could actually spin the basketball. One of the wrestlers, Carol Anderson, could actually do the whole basketball spin thing.
None of them could score a 3-point shot though. It was hilarious, man. They'll get missing.
but
and that's why they're wrestlers.
But I kind of enjoyed it.
For the day job.
but I like the goofy stuff in WWE sometimes, and it's not always perfect, but the wrestling is sports.
Well, I mean, and that is it. And so, I mean, like you say, so you believe AEW are like halfway through the game plan.
This is the important point for them now. They need to hold on now.
Would you say the game plan's been accelerated thanks to COVID? Because in many ways, it's given. So because I want to touch on how, like, why are these wrestlers jumping ship or choosing as free agents to sign for AEW over WWE? And one of the main things we were talking about, this is something I didn't know about, the creative control that you're allowed to keep as an AEW wrestler as opposed to a WWE? Do you want to, is that something
I think
you can both kind of...
They get a bit more freedom in AEW, or Craig, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the WWE tends to be, I think pretty much there's writers.
Because being a wrestler's half the time, isn't it? The other half the time is you're this name that's just out there on the Twitterverse.
Aye. WWE is a bunch of writers. They pretty much write these, pretty much Vince and McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, and they kind of have a look over it, and then
they look at it and go, how can we make this worse?
Well, some cases, and I think wrestlers try and put some of their ideas across, and
at one point I thought Ronaldo was going to sign for WWE just to try and get their ends.
And I think they seem to get across, but AEW, I think it seems to be a bit more. I think obviously Tony Khan is the main guy. He writes the television from what I've read. And but I think the wrestlers can give over more ideas, and there's more of a kind of maybe a communication talk there about.
We get guys like Chris Jericho who've got a lot of creative control. The Elite have got a lot of creative control.
Don't start me in Chris Jericho.
Oh.
Recently, man, as I was saying to you before, man, about another thing with the booking, between him and MJF, that should have been really good. Yeah. And to me, that was a really big disappointment.
What was wrong with it? Just the execution of it.
Everything about it. At the start of it, they had everybody was really hyped up. They'd made two fractions. MJF had his fraction, Chris Jericho had his fraction, and you thought, that'd be really, really good. And then really, really bad.
They kind of ignored the factions in the end. It came to be more about just them two, which is fine. But it was the execution at the end, because the idea in principle is quite cool. Jericho had to fight through all these obstacles to get to MJF at the end. But in terms of real life, we know that Jericho is in a band called Fozzy, and they're going to go on a tour just now. Sorry. What would have made sense is MJF's a young guy up and coming, kind of like the AEW's version of the Miz, and he has won every match before, but he should have also won this one as well. And then that would have wrote Jericho out for a few months while he goes and does his thing. Then Jericho could come back and get his win eventually,
Give me an honest, Craigie, do you think Jericho can still go in the ring?
Not to the extent he used to, but
too much bubbly?
No.
Too much of the bubbly.
He's still one of my heroes in wrestling and stuff. I still like to see him in the ring and stuff. But
He was my favourite guy in the Attitude Era. Mm-hmm. Now this might be a bit strange, but there's something, I don't know if it might just be me, but I think there's something sad when you watch when the wrestler gets older.
So Hulk Hogan couldn't lift his leg and all that.
And what I mean is, you're just going to yourself, you stop. I was a bit of that with some of the Undertaker's last matches, man. Undertaker used to put on brilliant matches, especially WrestleMania season, man, but some of his last ones, man, you're watching when you shouldn't really be doing this.
Tie-up dog kind of thing.
And I just feel that way with Chris Jericho. I'm a master critic of that. Actually, I love Chris Jericho, he's my favourite guy, but I just feel sometimes watching him now, I just go, I was going to say,
would you like to see him transition into a sort of Sting role? But even Sting can still go,
don't get me wrong, I think Chris can go he can go a bit better than Sting, but I still think he should maybe start to think about taking a back seat.
No, I think that's what's happening now. I think that's what they're doing. I still think he can go. It was that
It's just maybe why they've got CM Punk in now, because somebody just younger, fitter, almost like a passing of the baton.
So people think Punk's older than he is, but Punk's not even that old. Punk's still got, Jericho, is 55. So theoretically, he's got 10 years at least to go. If you compare that to Jericho.
Maybe because I think the COVID thing has really, it's accelerated the AEW game plan for sure. It has to, because there's no way they knew that WWE were going to cut all those wrestlers. It's incredible.
What I would say
Bray Wyatt, it's unbelievable.
What I would say is it has helped in that sense a bit, because WWE have took the advantage to, cut losses. I'm doing the finger, cut losses, but they're just
big money stars.
A lot of people were suspecting at the time that WWE are actually looking to sell. Vince is looking to sell the company, because part of what you do, cut liabilities for the company in terms of, I don't know this is whatever, but a lot of people were suspecting what WWE were doing a few months back. They cut a lot of wrestlers for a few months in a row, 10 one month, 10 the next month, a variation of big names who weren't that well known, just a variation of a lot of people, and they were kind of using COVID as the excuse for that. Whereas I don't think they really had to do that, and that's where WWE are a bit brutal, and that's why a lot of people are going to AEW, because of the work, the morality of the company kind of thing, which you can touch on a bit as well. But what I was going to say about AEW, I think what's really benefited the AEW and WWE to a wee extent just now with some of this, because WWE isn't great just now, but there is a lot of things that are good in WWE just now as well, like the Bloodline.
Yeah, that's probably the best. Yeah. I think that
SmackDown's great actually.
My personal opinion, Raw's can be unwatchable.
Raw's poor.
Poor.
It's really poor.
What is it in particular? Is it just lack of exciting talent to
it's
watch?
too long to start with. Too long. But they won't cut
long.
it because they get too much sponsorship and advertisements because of the 3 hour time slot. You get a lot of money in those extra hour that you wouldn't get. So they'd cut a lot of sponsorship and advertisement.
There's not much top talent on Robin. I think it was recently. I think it was Bobby Lashley was in the ring, and then certain guys came out to confront him. And I think it was him. I think it was him, Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, and Randy Orton. And I actually looked at it and I went, I think that's literally all they've got.
That's
there.
all they've got.
You're looking at the top end of the roster.
See, when you look back traditionally, SmackDown for me was always the best wrestling show because SmackDown traditionally in the past had Guerrero, Mysterio.
Its diversity with the cruiserweights was its strength.
Had Shawn Michaels, it had Undertaker was always a SmackDown guy for a long time as well. I mean, it could go on forever. SmackDown always was the better wrestling show, but the thing about Raw was that it always had big names. Raw always had big names,
Raw
but
had the mega stars.
Now it's not strong at all. NXT was always I've loved NXT for years now, but there's a lot happening with NXT just now, but ruining it a wee bit. Took advantage of Triple H action for a wee Hart then attack, and Triple H is gone for a week or two, and suddenly NXT's totally changed. But what I would say with AEW though, the big benefit they've got just and as I say, WWE isn't perfect, but SmackDown is good. I enjoy SmackDown,
especially the Roman Reigns stuff.
Yeah,
I think Roman Reigns has been delivering his best stuff. I mean, I remember when he was.
That's because of the addition of Paul Heyman.
Don't forget Paul Heyman as well. Paul Heyman's in there.
Paul Heyman's a genius, man. You put Paul Heyman with anybody, and he can. But I still, to be fair to actual Roman Reigns in himself. I think he's got a lot better on the mic.
It's what they should have done with Cena years ago. Turn him bad.
Turn him heel,
but Cena does, the thing with Cena is he still does so much Make-A-Wish stuff and all that they just don't want to risk. But see if WWE want to do something controversial and drastic, and they've always said that, turn Cena bad and see what happens.
I think they've missed their chance to do that just because he's so into his movies now. He's only
not going to be there all the time.
He's only going to come back for for example, at SummerSlam, there one rematch with Roman Reigns to put somebody over and then away, do another move.
The thing I keep going to go to say it and I keep getting distracted, but the thing that I was going to say, sorry, AEW, the big advantage with them just now is like with the crowd. So I don't think it's changed too much. I think maybe it has surprised them how much talent they've been able to access more than they thought they would have. They've obviously been talking to guys like CM Page and that they were in the WWE, but the WWE guys they've been able to obtain, like Daniel Bryan, I think they're surprised that they maybe got them. They're obviously going to jump and take them, you know. Big Show, people forget Big Show.
There's more than just a checkbook, isn't there? Because like you say, it's given the. You talk about creative control and all that, but is it the Twitter control you are?
Well, Daniel Bryan's case, a lot of the more minor wrestlers that they've got for WWE, I'm saying minor, but they're still a good level, like your Miros, who was Rusev and stuff like that. There's a few reasons as to why they've got them in creative control and that, but Daniel Bryan was because he had these injuries in his past, and Daniel Bryan actually is probably one of the few guys who've actually said good things about WWE as he's left in the future, getting back to WWE.
Don't burn that bridge.
Don't burn the bridge, basically, but Daniel Bryan was saying that he's still in good terms with Vince. The reason that he left, and Vince was a bit disappointed, obviously, and he's actually side, but Daniel Bryan has had a few serious neck injuries. He was out for a long time, but he came back again. And Vince is wanting him to be careful, take it easy when he matches. And Daniel Bryan has got a lot of ambition of matches he wants to do. And a lot of these guys are Japan. AEW have got a kind of, it's called the Forbidden Door, which you might have heard about, Johnty. So they're
more open to basically.
Let us know what's the Forbidden Door.
I like Craig Buff.
So it's basically they've got an unofficial deal, but it obviously is a deal, right, with like other wrestling organisations to transfer talent over and like have these dream matches and stuff like that. Because we've got John Moxley, who was Dean Ambrose in WWE, fighting. I forgot. It's one of these Japanese legends who's walked through the Forbidden Door the same night that Punk arrived, basically, which has been forgot about a wee bit because for obvious reasons. But. Oh no, it was actually Adam. It was the night Adam. So it's basically there's all these dream matches you can have, and it promotes each. So Japanese wrestlers, AEW guys, and that's what Daniel Bryan was looking for. Just a bit
of fluidity.
He's just wanting to fulfil all these ambitions. Guys, he's not. Daniel Bryan's not really. Although his first match he's not going to beat Omega for the title. It's too soon. Omega will lose to Hangman, who's one of the guys who are talking to build and make more famous, but. Paige has got a few things going on in his personal life just now as well, but so I don't know what's going to happen there. But Daniel Bryan isn't so much interested in titles. Daniel Bryan against these guys, Kenny Omega for one, who he's never wrestled. And that kind of platform. I'm actually not sure if he's wrestled them in the indie before they became big. He probably did, but in terms of now and in that platform, worldwide audience, all these matches. The other guys you're talking about, with Twitch and all that. So a lot of people who maybe aren't like the big stars who are guaranteed massive contracts and merchandise deals, they supplement their income. They get a good decent income, being mid-carders or well-known guys, but a lot of people assume that wrestlers are rich. They pay for a lot of their own stuff, which is something that we'll touch on at some point as well, about unionising and stuff, because a lot of the stuff, like, they pay for their own travel and board and all that kind of stuff, a lot of their own food expense, etc. So a lot of their income that they get goes back on expenses, whereas they started capitalising on Twitch, etc., all these kind of things.
Social platforms.
Like, Paige was making an extra bit or something, and WWE wanted to control that, which kind of WWE, I could see their point, because they own the copyrights and looks and stuff, but at the end of the day, a lot of these people done it after their own backs and done it in their name, not WWE. It's a long story, but these guys, when they went to AEW are like, you can, if you're earning an extra 40 grand, I'm not saying all of them are earning an extra 40 grand a month, but even if it's just an extra 5 grand, 10 grand a month, if you're being told by AEW, we're not going to give you any extra money, and you're going to be on this that you're on, and you're only going to get paid extra money, which is not guaranteed every week, because AEW will guarantee you a better wage weekly or monthly, and also Twitch streams and stuff, and you can keep that income.
It's no competition, is it?
You're going to say, well, okay, it's like, no problem. That's one, and a lot of people need WWE just now, and just the whole lackadaisical approach to booking. I'm not going about it.
Do you think, come back on AEW plans, like, so they've got these guys now, they've got to accommodate them, could they be sitting in the way of somebody's chance for a push?
I understand this, but do you know the weird condition? Wrestlers should be on every week, twice a week, SmackDown, Raw. The main guy should always be there. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you'll get far more out of them.
You're going to... The boxers fight every week. The MMA fighters fight every week.
It's like having two starting 11s.
Yeah, wrestling's not real, but, what they put their bodies through is real. It's still,
absolutely, yeah.
I've seen a wrestling ring being built from scratch. It's not foam under there. It's hard wood. I remember a good friend of mine who is in a wee Scottish wrestling organisation just now told me the first time he got slammed in the wrestling ring at a training centre, Discovery Wrestling, the first time he got slammed on the ring, he thought it was going to be easy. Could you see the ring bouncing? It's like, it'll be fine. It literally winded him, took the breath right out, you're getting slammed in hardwood. It's only a thin foam cover and just a base. But yeah, it's, yeah, I'll stop waffling on.
No, it's absolutely fine, I think. I was going to say, I think we've covered quite a wee bit of ground there in our kind of first episode of doing this. So I'm quite happy to leave it there, unless there's anything you think we've not discussed, or should we save to next time?
I've got loads of stuff in my mind I could talk about going for years, but if Johnny's going to maybe bring up just in
particular, apart from Shaw, is it something about WWE, something about AEW? Something about the both of them, or individual wrestlers?
I'll just maybe give a wee general. I think it's exciting now again to be a wrestling fan. Even as we're talking about, it's bringing people used to like wrestling back in now, having the kind of WWE and the EW, and also with big names like Punk and Bryan joining EW makes it a lot more interesting. But it's definitely making it a lot of exciting, and also what we're hoping, from a fan point of view, obviously competition. Again, what we want is WWE to maybe produce better storylines now, hopefully, and AEW keep getting a bit better, and obviously
this can only be good for fans.
It's only good for fans. That's
even
point.
The good thing for us as wrestling fans, that at our age, WWE is good for their kids. If they're going to say okay, then that's fine, right? They're larger than life characters still. It's still safer to let my kid watch AEW, to be honest. But that's where it's good for us, because AEW is a little bit edgier. They're allowed to swear. It can maybe push the boundary a wee bit more, possibly. We don't know. It depends how they want. See, the thing with Tony being a billionaire, and basically his mum, but he doesn't need to worry about money peeing off, an advertiser or a sponsorship deal, or he doesn't need to worry about that so much.
It's coming from a different angle almost, isn't it?
I do think their plan, as I say, they're halfway through their plan. I do think their plan is to, within 5 years, become, they're not billionaires. They do want to become profitable. You can't just do that. It'd be great if you can, if he just wants to just waste money and put on a wrestling show for us, that's great, but I'm sure his mum and dad want some money back. So I think, their 5-year plan is to be profitable, but I hope that does take away their edge, and I hope they do become a bit edgier, and even more so than what they are doing. That's what we're looking for, because what we love about wrestling, whereas its peak was when they pushed that envelope and they were edgy and they were controversial. And a lot of the stuff they did then they're probably going to get away with now, but you can still get to a certain extent.
Well, that's what all this money's for, all these new gimmicks now. You can't do what you've done before in the past and all that kind of thing, but think up new stuff. There's always something new to be done.
Yeah. There was one thing, last thing, stop talking about, you know how they're saying, every week there's always somebody new going to AEW for WWE, or such and such is all elite, and such and such is all elite. You remember, one of the, to reference one of the really controversial storylines at the time in WWE, do you remember Mark Henry had he was sexual chocolate, and he had the affair with Mae Young, and she gave birth to a hand. Yeah. Well, there's a meme going about just now. It's actually a guy dressed up as a fancy dress costume, but somebody's dressed up as Mae Young, and this guy's dressed up as a big giant hand.
He's grown up now.
And it's like, the hand is all elite. Because Mark Henry's with AEW as well, so it's like going to join his dad, but it's a guy's face and hand, and it's like somebody dressed up as Mae Young, but that's a great Halloween costume. But anyway, I don't think Karen would get that faster than me. But anyway, I need to show her it, and then she'd just be like, no.
Yeah, she'd be like, no, well, that's fantastic. I feel like I've actually learned a lot. I've got a notion to actually go and watch some of it, and I think that's kind of the point as well, like
I would
reaffirming.
Say, if you're going to watch one, watch the pay that was a few weeks back, and then go.
Yeah, definitely. So if there's anyone listening out there that's trying to get back into it, someone that's fallen away from it, and you've totally given up, it sounds as if things are going to get a little better very soon. And as from the rest of us, thanks very much for listening. Thanks for coming on, Buff. Thanks for coming on, Johnty.
No problem at all.
And we'll see you in a future episode of the podcast.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Shutdown initiated.